Views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olsen.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of After Hours AM. Whether you're north, south, east, or west, listen live, listen podcast, whether you're catching this over at iTunes or they're catching this on Podomatic, or, of course, UPRN 105.5 FM New Orleans. We love you. We want to hear from you. And tonight is True Crime Wednesday, a.k.a. After Hours AM, The Criminal Code. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
good evening, everybody. And Dr. Cole, how are you doing, dear?
I am doing great.
Good.
How are you?
Oh, not so bad. You know, we have a great show on tap tonight. We are kind of blowing the cover, so to speak, off the Slender Man and that case that is still unfolding in Wisconsin, of course. And we know what we're talking about is the young ladies that believe so much that the Slender Man was real that in order to gain access to be with him and live in his little cabin, the whole thing, they had to commit murder. And HBO did a wonderfully done documentary, and that will be mainly, we're going to have some people from excuse me, folks, some people from the documentary on tonight, as well as discussing amongst each other. I think it's a crazy set of circumstances. I really do believe 3 lives were destroyed by this internet meme, however you decide to pronounce it.
well, that and mental illness.
Yeah, well, yes, but yeah, mental illness, obviously. But what I'm saying is, it was the trigger object to cause the murder, attempted murder.
It certainly was.
That's why I'm excited about one of the guests that we have tonight, because I'm hoping, you know, as you guys know, I am a forensic psychologist, but I do not specialize with teenagers, you know, and that's something that I really, especially with the digital age, that I want to know more about, because I don't know, like, I mean, okay, I might have been particularly gullible or naive when I was younger, but I used to believe in a lot of stuff.
Well, sure.
You know?
Fairies, you know, Santa Claus, Slender Man, sure.
Well, yeah. Well, Ghost, oh my gosh. And I still love stuff like that. So it's like, I kind of am wondering, like, how much of it is true. I mean, obviously, one of the girls for sure is definitely mentally ill. But for the other one, like, how much of it was illness and how much of it is just kind of being a kid?
Well, you know, another thing that came to mind, and I was reading getting deeper into the psychosis part of it, or psychiatry part of it, and I stumbled upon a writing by Dr. Barry Taft, and everyone knows who he is, paranormal, man, San Pedro haunting. Did I do it correctly? Is that what's called Pedro there, Eric? You're from there.
Dude, it's Pedro, man.
Oh, Pedro, good.
Pedro.
San Pedro haunting. Well, anyhow, he wrote a very...
It's just Pedro.
Very long... Hey, Pedro. He wrote a really good paper on that, wondering if Slender Man now hasn't become a thought form.
I think that's a fascinating concept. I really do. I'm not necessarily sure I agree, but it would depend on your definition. But whether I end up agreeing or not, I think it's a really, really
his
concept, even brilliant concept, and it is certainly possible.
And
absolutely,
his reasoning. And
but you guys, I mean, wait, before you go further, Joel.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I am not the paranormal guru. Could you guys explain to me what a thought form
Well,
is?
basically, a thought form is a not. Are you familiar with the Philip experiment?
No.
Okay, if you focus on something hard enough and long enough and really put your all into it, there's a theory that you can create a ghost. Now, this ghost doesn't need to exist. It never did exist. You create what it is. You create its backstory. You create its personality. You even create why it's here for a lot of people. I mean, some people use thought forms or topas for good, where others use it for evil. And some don't realize it. Like in the case of Slender Man, there was so much mental power given to this thing that this object of a horror website, basically, one of those horror websites that made you doctor photos, stuff like that, to win a contest. But now there's been movies, there's been games, there's been this case in Wisconsin. The reasoning behind that now is there's been so much energy put out towards this that very well could have created a thought form that is, for lack of a better term, living and breathing.
Wow. It kind of blows it blows my mind a little, not in a bad way, because I'm very open to, especially like energy and how it's created and or like congeals if it isn't created.
Yeah,
I guess Einstein said that energy can't be destroyed, right? So how does that?
Well, basically, because we're changing form. We're changing the energy's form.
In essence, it's a theory that comes. Ghost isn't exactly what it is. It's just, for lack of a better word, that's kind of what we call all things that are incorporeal, as it were, but have some sense of being or personality, perhaps, so some reality. So where it really comes from is more parapsychology. So it's saying the mind is so powerful, and there are forces that we just don't understand yet, and it assumes the reality of a linkage between minds, in essence, the Jungian collective subconscious, as well as other theories. And so the mind is so powerful, and the minds are connected. And if you do combine that with as you were saying, Clarissa, the theory, or I guess it's the reality, that energy cannot be destroyed, it just takes other forms, you come up with this possible theory that human minds acting collectively, and if it was powerful enough, even a single mind, is actually able to focus enough attention and energy to create an entity. That's the concept.
And that's exactly what they did in the Philip experiment.
Exactly.
And they created Philip, which had his own backstory, which had everything a human being needs to live, so to speak, but in ghost form. But that being said, we will talk further about Slender Man and the case in Wisconsin and the HBO documentary at the top of the hour. But I was getting ready for the show today, and one thing that really dawned on me, kind of hit me like a Mack truck. We focus so much on true crime, of course, on the offenders, or the serial killers and things like that. The question I have, mainly for you, Clarissa, is what do they do when they put someone to death and they're wrong? What if they're exonerated? What if that person that's already dead has been exonerated via DNA, other evidence, and the family wants answers? Do they just give them my bad, or is there something more that they do to help this family?
It really depends on the state, and in my experience, and this is kind of a dangerous question for me. So I'm gonna talk about it in very general terms. When a state makes a mistake, and that's not just limited to putting somebody to death. That's maybe locking someone up for 30 years, let's say. Where then DNA.
Well, the reason get that time back.
And let me qualify this for a second for you is that the Freedom Foundation got a hold of me. Oh. And they had stumbled upon our show, and they big fans, by the way, but they also sent me a complete dossier of 8 people that have been in modern times put to death wrongly. And
they have proof of this.
Oh yeah, no, it's a foregone conclusion. It's been proven, like tampering with DNA evidence in Texas. I mean, as early as 2004, the last innocent man was put to death in Texas, and then it came out later on that the Forensic Science Commission later found that the evidence was misinterpreted. And they concluded that none of the evidence used against William, the guy was Cameron Todd William, was valid. As it turns out, the fire that he allegedly started to murder these people was really an accident due to, get this, a space heater.
Wow. And I've definitely seen cases where, it comes out later, especially with rape. That seems to happen more often than not, because back in the day, they didn't have DNA.
Sure.
A guy gets locked up for 30 years, and all of a sudden, they finally do the rape kit after it's been sitting in the freezer for 20 years, and he gets out. It's just, they don't get the time back. And usually, in my experience, there is a monetary settlement. And that's pretty much the end of story. There isn't even an apology in half of these cases. It is bizarre.
Should the people that sent an innocent man to death be put to death themselves? Because technically it is murder. That's the question the Freedom Project had for me.
Well, who would be responsible then? Is it the jury, the prosecutor, the judge?
That's what they're saying is a slippery slope, and that's why they work so hard. And I do appreciate them, because when I did speak with them on the phone, the representative, he made a valid point. It could be you, it could be me, it could be Eric, it could be anyone next that's wrongfully accused of a crime. And if things are mishandled, we could be next in the news, so to speak.
I totally agree. I'm always struck on literally a daily basis when I'm doing my work of the difference between the sentences that different individuals get. And it's based so much, not on the evidence, not on, all these things that you think would really matter.
Sure.
It's usually based on their attorney and how good their attorney is.
My Lord, they put, I think the youngest in United States, according to this information they gave me, is 14 years old, was the youngest person to be put to death.
My God, where was that?
Texas. They got like an express lane to old Sparky in Texas, man.
Don't they know the research on juveniles? That was
a long time ago. This is, what was it? 1915? Something like that but still, the case still sits there that he was found not guilty. And I guess when they got a hold of me, they're kind of curious of my thoughts, because it's a true crime show, and we talk about serial killers and crime and this and that. What my thoughts were, and I know, Eric, I'm going to let you tell me what your thoughts are first before I unveil my thoughts in this whole situation.
I am chomping at the bit, so I'm ready to roll here. First of all, you asked about would those who, I assume you said knowingly, put someone to death?
Well,
wouldn't it have to be knowingly for them to themselves be guilty of murder?
They use the case of the mishandling of the forensic science to say knowingly, because they knew it was mishandled and misinterpreted.
Well, if they knew, do they do it intentionally?
It came out later on in court that they weren't necessarily the most forthcoming group, the prosecution team.
Well, I would say, first of all, if this was done knowingly and purposefully, then certainly that is a much higher level of guilt than if they just screwed up. Because, look, it's a tough job. And look at elsewhere in government, you got all kinds of rules that prevent people in power, in office, from being even sued, right? Like you can't even sue the government, for example, under normal circumstances, and you can't sue people in civil court for quote unquote normal business while in office. All right, so that's number one. Number two, the argument, I completely agree. They may take it a little too far in other areas, but I completely agree that if in fact that is true, and I have no reason to think it isn't, that 8 people have been put to death who it's been proved didn't do it, then that for me just absolutely reinforces my own predisposition to be against the death penalty, because you can't take it back. It is true, if someone is wrongly convicted and they spend 10, 20, 30, whatever years in jail wrongfully, they can't get those years back, but at least they're still alive. And at least they're aware
Yeah.
that they have been exonerated, and they have at least that level, and their families and whomever, and the public at large has the satisfaction of knowing that they have been exonerated and it's been stated publicly. So that is different. If you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing you can do about it. And for me alone, that is enough to preclude the death penalty.
I'm going to butt in on you for a second just to reinforce what you're saying. The study that they sent me, of course, says according to independent science research, proceeding the National Academy of Science determined that at least 4% of people on death row were likely innocent.
That's a lot. I mean, that's...
that's 4%, so that's 4 people out of every 100.
1 in 25. Think of that. 1 in 25.
It just blew my... You know what? I used to be, until I got a hold of these people. We talked. I'm starting to bend a little bit on my whole stance of the death penalty. I used to be like, yeah, hang 'em high, Jack. I'm more like, wow, man.
You can't take it back.
Think about these people, Spam. Well, first off, think about the people that know they're innocent and they have to go meet their maker. Knowing and screaming, I'm innocent the whole way. Second, think of the poor people that had to do the deed of putting them to death. Just doing their job, being told this is what they had to do. And thirdly, the state now, it seems, according to the Freedom Project once again, they really could give a care less, the state. It's what they consider relatively normal collateral damage in the name of justice.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. One person is far too many for something like that. Far too many.
You should not have that kind of collateral damage, as far as I'm concerned. Not when you're the government. Not when you are representing the people. This is a democracy as well as a republic form of government, but democracy nonetheless. And so the government is not just representing us; it is literally. We're killing people because So we are killing people incorrectly, as it turns out, and under certain circumstances, in the name of the people and in the name of justice. And I think that's wrong. But the other reason I think it's wrong, the death penalty, is just that the precedent that it sets. You're raising the level of violence within your society, and I just think we need to move forward again. I've said this before. It's not like I'm a bleeding heart, and I think that criminals should be coddled or anything else like that. Criminals are criminals. Get them away from me. Lock them up for a long time. I'm starting to have a little bit of being persuaded. I've been reading up on some of the European systems, and I think we talked last week, or at least we were going to, about this murder in Iceland, which was so unusual. They average in the entire nation 1.8 murders a year.
Wow.
Entire nation.
Wow.
So it's a big deal. It's a big deal when there's a murder in Iceland. And there's a recent case, a young woman. It turned out to be, it appears, the suspects are actually foreigners. They're from Greenland. And so that makes it even stranger for them. But anyway, there are various systems. We're still about the most punitive of the quote-unquote developed nations in terms of how we go about dealing with criminals. And so there's certainly something to be said for rehabilitation. There's something to be said for reducing the expense of people putting away forever. But still, nonetheless, I don't want violent, dangerous criminals around me. I don't want them coddled. I would like to think it's possible that we should be rehabilitating as many criminals as possible, but I also know it's not possible with a lot of them. And, of course, Clarissa knows better than anyone about the details of what I'm talking about. But anyway, nonetheless, the point is I don't want them coddled. I want them put away. I am not an advocate, for crime and criminals. I'm not on their side. But I am saying that the death penalty does more violence, I think, to society at large, and it sets a bad example. And then from the purely moral / philosophical standpoint, I do not want to put one innocent person, I was going to say man, but it's person, to death. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that on my conscience as a member of this body politic.
I totally agree. I mean, I like I said, my opinion, just in doing the show with you guys, and then, of course, having this information black and white, which I did, of course, do my due diligence and made sure this is all legit. Absolutely is legitimate information. Gregory, sorry. I got cold, folks, so if I do sound a little more froggy, that's because I got the creeping crud. Gregory Stinney, a 14-year-old black boy, that's who it was that was executed, was sent to the gas chamber at that time in 1944. Wrongfully convicted of murdering 2 girls, 7 and 11, and he was the youngest person ever executed in the United States. And so I just want to get that out there.
No, it's a tragedy. It's an unmitigated tragedy. And when you look at other developed countries and what they're doing, I mean, obviously my profession is in the rehabilitation field.
Sure.
But when you look at Europe, when you look at Norway, you look at Canada, you are looking at countries that they start rehabilitation efforts the second you set foot in the facility. The minute you step in, they start doing a risk assessment with you, a needs assessment with you, and they start working toward getting you ready to leave. And there is that small percentage and to your point, Eric, I think it is actually a fairly small percentage of people that cannot rehabilitate.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a heck of a lot of work with some people, and they might always be a little bit criminal, as I wouldn't trust them necessarily around all my stuff alone, sort of a thing.
Sure.
But are they going to violently recidivate? No, I don't know that they will. But America is we have almost no rehabilitative efforts unless you are mentally ill. And when I say mentally ill, I mean sick.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah. Well, first, I'd like to thank the folks in the Freedom Project for listening to the show, number one. Number two, for saying the information. And another point that they brought up is in this country, there is something called private prisons. They're privately owned. I didn't even know these things existed until they talked to me about it.
They're terrifying.
That they are privately owned, so there is no incentive at all for rehabilitation because they get a lot of money for locking people up.
There's very little, if any, oversight either. And the people that work there, like, I thought at one point in my career, I was getting kind of sick of San Quentin. Okay, I'm gonna be honest.
Sure.
And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take a look around. I'm gonna see what's out there. And the private prisons kind of came into my view as I was looking.
How was that?
I thought, holy crap, I can't. Oh my God. See, okay, I know that nobody likes the state prisons and that there's a long way to go. And there's a lot of jobs. I mean, yes, I've heard it. I know, I'm there all the time. But when it comes to you, maybe run the rehabilitative
Sure.
job in some of these places where you have had zero correctional experience. No.
Well, yeah, you're breaking up a little bit,
that
Clarissa.
makes it incredibly unsafe.
Yeah, we didn't catch that last part. You're dropping out a little bit, but we got the gist. There's no reason. There's really no checks and balances in a private facility. And wouldn't that teeter on unconstitutional?
I would think it does. I'm confused about it, to be honest. I don't know why there isn't oversight.
You would think that I'm not sure if that's even. I mean, obviously it has to be constitutional, otherwise it won't be existing. But I don't know. Very, very crazy. But before we go on to the headlines, after the break, of course, Clarissa, I've never asked you this. What's it really like when you go to prison?
If you're an inmate?
Yeah. When you go to prison, what should one expect?
Oh, well, you're going to spend a long time in jail first, okay, waiting, at least in this state. Because they're, making bed space and all of that. But then, so you spend time in jail, you get used to it. And then they put you on a bus one day. And if you take medication, they may or may not give you your medication. They may or may not give you a lunch. Who knows? You'll be transported anywhere from an hour to 10 hours on this bus. And you will get to something called a reception center.
Oh, it sounds so nice. Reception center.
It sounds nice, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like I want to go
red
there.
Carpet? Yeah, so there's only 2 reception centers in all of California, one for the South, one for the North. So it doesn't matter what prison you end up in, you're going to start in that reception center. So San Quentin is the reception center for Northern California. So let's,
Okay.
you do a crime in Chico, go to the reception center. You're going to get off a bus with 10 other buses. So there's 500 guys, 600 guys. And then they're going to put you in these cells with like 30 or 40 other guys. And you're going to have to wait until
Wow.
you can see a medical doctor, a mental health doctor, and of course they make you strip out like 3 times. That's the get naked, spread your cheeks cough. You're gonna have to do that like 3 times.
Wow.
You get seen by all these people, and then they basically stamp your paperwork and say, okay, he's got this, this, and this, but he can be housed with general population. And then they just give you a jumpsuit that may or may not be clean, may or may not fit you. You might get underwear, you might not. You might get shoes, you might not. By the way, if you get the good shoes, they'll be taken from you within like 3 minutes once you get on the cell block, so don't even think about it. And then you'll be housed with some random individual who's been there for a while and is going to try to shake you down for everything you have.
Now
About
that's the way to treat people like human beings.
It is extremely scary. They're called fish.
Wow.
When they first come in, the new fish, people will scream out to them, the other inmates, on the yard, go, hey, fish, when they're there. And a lot of my assignment at San Quentin, once when I was not working on Condemned Row, was to evaluate and talk to these new guys. And I mean, it was hard. It was really, really hard. A lot of the counseling just was telling them what to say, what not to say, who to talk to, who not to talk to, what to do, what not to do.
How scared were these guys, and what was the average age, would you say, of the first-time offender coming into prison?
They're young. They're very young. They're usually in their early 20s. Some are even younger, 18. But a lot of them that have a long criminal record, it doesn't really faze them that much. So if they've been in juvie a bunch of times, this is just a bigger version of that. The ones that are really scared are the kind of what you were talking about, Joel, with the guys that maybe they didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They got rolled up into something and they don't have a criminal history.
And I don't know if you can answer this or not, and if you can't, don't. But have you ever met someone that you said to yourself, that person's innocent?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. I've been doing this since 2003, 4, and in that entire time, I've met 2.
What do you do when you get that gut feeling, or are you told just to ignore it?
No, I'm not told. I'm never told to just ignore it. With one of the guys, he wanted to talk about it, the fact that he didn't do it, and with the other guy, he grew up in a gang-infested neighborhood. And he knew that if he pressed the fact that he didn't do it, that the gang members that did do it would kill his family.
Gotcha.
So he didn't want me to pursue it, and I did not.
Okay. No, I can imagine being put in that position. So really kudos to you. That takes a much stronger individual than I to be able to deal with what you've dealt with in the prison system. I mean, that's truly a special individual. And I don't mean that like special ed. I mean, you're a special person to be able to do that. Although, I did see you on the short bus once. But sometimes heroes ride the short bus. What do you think, Eric? I know you've never been in jail, I'm sure, but I'm sure you do.
Oh, no.
Oh no, you do. You have a jail story? Oh, wait, let me guess. Before you even start, I'm gonna say DWI.
I'm going to say drunk and disorderly.
Oh, drunk.
Wow.
I would love that story.
I have to ponder what that means about how Clarissa feels about me.
Sure.
I'm gonna think. No, it's just 2 DUIs.
Oh, okay.
And I was in basically overnight twice, so it was quite a while. It was. It was several hours. Several hours. It was. It was
it scares you straight. Yeah,
not happy about it. I was in overnight twice, and then the second one. This was during a very difficult period of my life. I was getting divorced. I was deciding what business to go into because I was getting out of DJing because it was a really bad influence on me. In other words, I drank too much, and it was too easy. And so, in my age, I was late 20s, early 30s. So I got
Oh, that's a long time ago.
A very long time ago.
Yep.
I got 2 in a real short period. It was only 18 months.
Well,
and it was exactly at the time, and this was in California, and they were passing really stringent new laws.
Yep.
So I got caught up in that. So it was really kind of a nightmare. So the second time, I was actually... ultimately, I got out of the worst charge. It was reduced, but I still, because of the guidelines, I still had to serve. It was something like 5 days.
Wow.
It was a pretty big deal.
Did you tell people?
Clarissa knows about this in California, because there's so many people and there's such overcrowding. You can take the country club way out, and you can literally pay by the day to be quote unquote jailed at the cushiest possible.
No way.
State. So I served my 5 days in Rancho Palos Verdes, and all you have to be is on the grounds. I was never in a cell. Never in a cell.
Well, we got to run a break, and Birdman of Alcatraz, Dr. Clarissa Cole, and myself, we will be right back right after this with your true crime headlines. Don't go anywhere.
All the time now. Really thought the thing would go my way, but I bet against it all. Something about the way the summer comes in, it's that smooth.
Hey, if you're catching this edition of After Hours AM on podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to After Hours AM. And for all you iTunes listeners, make sure you rate and review After Hours AM.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires, or dating one. Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day, because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852, or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At ACE, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at ACE, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. ACE,
the helpful place.
You're listening to After Hours AM, the best in alternative talk radio. Got a question, comment, guest suggestion, or just want to say hi? Contact us at afterhoursam@gmail.com. That's afterhoursam@gmail.com. Want to call the show and be interactive? That's easy. The number is 612-326-6874. Again, the number is 612-326-6874. And thank you for listening.
Rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again. Yes, you will, precious. You will get the hose.
And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And it is time for everyone's favorite segment of the show, at least one of my favorite ones because I don't have to talk so much. And that is for the true crime headlines.
I am very excited. So I figured that today, since we're going to be talking about the, Slender Man case, we could focus on underage offenders because there's a lot of them out there. But before I get to those stories, I had to throw this one in. I could not help myself because it was that crazy. Really. It is something called the Automated Virtual Agent for Truth Assessments in Real Time, or AVATAR.
Oh,
it sounds super creepy to me. I'm like,
wow, well, that is really creepy.
It is a kiosk, okay? A kiosk
No.
that uses a suite of sensors and artificial intelligence to collect and analyze hundreds of different body cues and then create a risk assessment score, which is passed along to an official.
Wow. Oh, to an official, too, so they know who you are.
Well, it is basically like an automated lie detector.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't that just the automated lie detector? Now, who is this passed? What official is this passed on to, and what country is this in?
Well, they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily in use that much yet, but what they want to do is use it for security at border crossings or airports or in customs or immigration. So it doesn't look like they're necessarily wanting to use this with criminal cases, but they want to use it for, I have a hard enough time getting through TSA anyway.
Yeah. But
I don't want to do this.
Hasn't the lie detector been debunked so many times? It's not even funny.
Yeah, it has. Although I would like to practice on this thing to see if I could fake it out.
Sure. Because I thought, I've heard different ways of beating the lie detector, and really, quite honestly, just don't show any emotion. You'll be golden.
It's so
be
hard.
Cold
though,
fish.
Joel. I've been strapped up to one before, and I gotta tell you, it's kind of a creepy process.
It's probably uncomfortable. You got a guy asking you these deep, dark questions. I
was freaked out when he asked me my name. I couldn't even, you got all these straps on you, and they're looking at their galvanic skin response. And, how much am I sweating? How much am I breathing? I am clearly not enough of a psychopath. But the thought that they would put these in at, airports or border crossings?
Yes.
Kind of creepy.
Well, that is very creepy because it's just one more step to Big Brother putting us all away.
I know, what if the artificial intelligence decided they didn't like certain people? They're lying.
Like Skynet?
Yes!
Ooh, Skynet comes online. I'll try to do the Skynet theme for Terminator. And Skynet comes.
The Terminator walks out, takes it away.
That's right. Yeah. You don't pass, and then there's an Arnold Schwarzenegger knockoff coming on. You'll come with me. And he takes you back there, and you're never heard from again.
Exactly.
And then you get into something and then they put you into something called Soylent Green.
Soylent Green is people. So I don't mean to ruin it for anyone that hasn't seen it.
Yeah, from the 1970s. Sure, if you haven't seen the movie.
That is granting way too much leeway to spoilerhood. You know what? I have to bring this up. Spoilers are allowed. Screw everyone.
That's right. Screw them all. Spoilers are allowed. If you
haven't seen it by now, you don't know what we're talking about.
That's 45-year-old movie.
Hey, they free Willy at the end, all right? They're done.
Very upset. Well, I thought you guys would like that just because of the thought of hey, we passed security, but we got to hook you up to this machine first. Hold on.
Skynet is watching.
It is true.
Beware the Terminator.
Done with AVATAR. I want to get on to some of these teen defendants. So
they get so
it gets so creepy so fast.
Yeah, well, that and they we going from one side of the spectrum when people are innocent to a group of people, juveniles, that don't get harsh enough penalties. In my opinion, sometimes.
It depends. It definitely depends on where they are. I figured this one might kind of appeal to you guys on sort of the paranormal angle.
Sure, go ahead.
There was a group, well, not a group, but two, a couple, if you will, named Jasmine Richardson, and she decided she got together. She was only 12, by the way, when this happened.
Oh, wow.
She got together with this guy who was 23 years old.
Oh,
dang!
Yeah.
Damn.
Robbing the frickin' cradle.
Yeah, no
12
kidding.
and 23.
Wow.
His name was Jeremy Steinke, and he said now that he was a 300-year-old werewolf. First of all, in paranormal terms, is that even possible?
First off, the guy's last name is Stanky.
Pretty much, yes.
Everyone knows werewolves smell bad.
Can you imagine trying to score in the bar with that last name? What's your name? Stanky.
Exactly.
I mean,
and he said he tries to score with this girl who's 12
Yeah.
by saying he's a 300-year-old werewolf.
So he shows up and he says, "You ever see the show Breaking Dawn?" Why, yes. I'm Tina.
Well, this predates that. He was on a website, get this, called vampirefreaks.com.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Really? Do you frequent that place, Eric?
I've actually heard of this case and that site as a result. And now that you're saying it, I recall the age difference and how scummy it is. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these, you don't want to overstate it, but a lot of these niche dating, meet people sites, I mean, there's some bad stuff that comes out of it.
Well,
People
sure there
really
is.
do need to be careful. You
Yeah.
got to be careful, and you got
Yeah.
to pay attention. And you need to utilize, when you're on the internet, you do not cease to exist in the real world.
That is so true.
Apply some of the senses that every human being picks up from a very early age. Your spidey senses.
That's right, the spidey
Use
sense.
some of that online, peeps.
Yeah,
If you're going to a site called vampirefreaks.com to date someone,
well, let me go
I
there
don't know
right
if
now.
you have those senses.
Hold
Do you?
on. Let's go to vampirefreaks.com right now.
Well, but remember, she was 12.
Well, yes, you're correct. He was 20. Well, she was going there too. He was 23. I'm gonna let you guys look up the Vampire Freaks.
I am going there right now. I'm gonna see what this looks like and if what's going on this website. Vampire Freaks.
They met and I guess they got together in real life. Okay, in Canada. They're in Canada.
Okay.
And they get together, but okay. So what do you think the parent? Okay, you guys are both parents.
Yes.
I'm not. What would you say if your 12-year-old is like, "Hi, somebody's coming over later, and I met him on VampireFreaks.com, and he's 23."
Well, he would find out in a really, really quick that I am pro Second Amendment. He would find that out in a matter of, I'd be on the porch, and I'm looking at VampireFreaks.com.
I can't imagine the 12-year-old girl, as silly as she might have been. On the other hand, she was mature enough to be looking for such things on the internet and end up there. So obviously she kind of has a clue as to what's going on. And I don't think she was going to tell her parents, to be honest.
Well, she did. She did tell them. They found
my
out.
Lord.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's how this whole mayhem started. But Joel, what is this site like?
I'm over here right now, and I'm looking at a Rebellious 3423, and she is female, age of 25, but get this, her turn-ons are bloodletting, mutilation.
Well, not obviously.
Mutilation. Murder
Check
of
the
small.
URL.
Listen. Murder of small upland fur-bearing animals.
Oh my goodness!
This is a real person. And I'm not gonna say a location because she does put a location where you can meet her if you decide you want to go kill some fur-bearing animals with her. But yes, and her sexual orientation so far, most of this page, while I've been looking, believe it or not, is bisexual seems to be the prevalent.
Well, why limit yourself?
Well, exactly. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So I'm not saying that to say that there's something wrong with that. I'm just saying it seems to be a bunch of confused people. Not that bisexual people are confused, but the vampire people are confused. I think
is Necropolis a real place? That doesn't sound real.
I mean, I think that they're
You know what the
confused.
new one is? I'm telling you, bi is passe. You know what the new hot sexuality is?
Pan.
Exactly.
I heard that the other day. I was talking to a young guy, and and he's like, "You know what pansexual is?" No, I do not know what pansexual is. Is it something to do with pots and pans? He just laughs and walks away and shaking his head. So what is pansexual? If you can discuss it on a PG level for us, that'd be great because again, FCC is listening. But if
I can do it in one
Go for it, Eric. Yeah.
PG sentence. You'll screw anything.
Anything?
Anything.
Like if you see a sponge that looks particularly attractive to you.
I think it has to be a person.
Oh, does
I'm
it?
pretty sure it has to be a person.
Okay.
Well, it's preferable, but it just means you are not limiting yourself in any way. Pan means across the board.
Wow.
And that to me is that's sort of a ridiculous term. I'm just going to say that because bisexual pretty much does cover that. It really
kind of does if there's only two, right?
It does, right? And there really are, regardless of what people will send me hate mail about, there really are only two genders because you're born one.
You're kind of one or the other. Yeah.
You are one. No, genetically speaking, you are one or the other.
Even hermaphrodites
how you identify is different.
Even the odd hermaphrodite is one of the other.
It's genetically speaking, if you get down to like the XY chromosomes, yes, they're going to be XX or XY, or they could be XXY or XYY.
Gotcha.
I mean, there's still fundamentally one or the other. So So anyway, pan is just a way of saying I'm in no way limited. Bring them on. Bring on the ponies. Bring on the dogs. Bring on the dead people.
Here comes the ponies, dogs, and dead people. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I'm going to get off Vampire Freaks and grab the Purell here and wash my hands while I talk because that place I'm never visiting again, by the way. But if you choose to, it's vampirefreaks.com. There you can go and kill fur-bearing animals that live in upland areas. But
Clarissa needs to resume her tale here now.
Yes.
Okay.
Keep going.
So in Canada, Jasmine, who's 12, and now I don't know many 12-year-olds that really do love their families all that much if they're starting to individuate, which is healthy, right? If you're, especially girls, to 12, 13, 14, you're trying to form your own identity. And if you've got parents that are religious or strict, you're like, I hate them. And little brothers can be really annoying. So Jasmine decided that she really didn't like her family, and since her family said, no, you cannot date this 300-year-old, 23-year-old werewolf.
Vampire.
He's a werewolf. You cannot date him because you're 12 and he's 23, and that's crazy. She decided to go to this guy and say, you know what, I really think that we should kill my family. And Jeremy Steinke said, sure, where do I sign up? So that is essentially what happened. Steinke came over and stabbed the mother, then stabbed the father, and then Jasmine slit her 7-year-old brother's throat.
Wow.
Yes, and she was only 12, and so she went on trial. But Jasmine, since she was a juvenile in Canada, they have very strict, they can only be sentenced to 10 years. So she did 4 years in a psychiatric hospital, another 4 under conditional community supervision, and she is out.
Wow. So she's off scot-free.
Pretty much, and he is still doing time as far as I know because he was 23. So
and he has hundreds of years to go.
Well, I mean, he's 300 years old. Hopefully they set him to certain year limit and not just life. Because Lord,
I think he did get life. They did get married,
stay.
or at least he proposed to her.
Wow.
You know what I heard was, even in Canada, they thought this was a little beyond the pale.
Okay.
So they sent him to the pound.
Even in Canada. Yes, our Canadian friends in the North, which, of course, we're on Paranormal Radio Network. Yes, we love you to our friends up to the North. But that being said, even in Canada, I know. I know. Did you say yoping?
No, I said yoking.
Yoking?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. You betcha. Yeah, okay, I cannot do that. But very, very crazy. What else is an old hopper? I got to get away from this vampire crap.
Getting away from the vampires. Yeah. We're going to go to 2 girls. So there have been several female cases out there, and we're going to be talking about one later tonight. So here is one that predated the Slender Man murder. So this was 2 girls who met at a group home. Okay, so there was a group home where Cindy Collier met Shirley Wolf, and they just knew that they were kindred spirits when they met there.
Oh, sure, why not?
Of course, they had the same. Yeah. Well, and to be fair, they really did have very troubled childhoods. Yeah. Lots of abuse, lots of people that did not step in to help them that could have. And so they were both similarly angry. They got together once, they were released from the group home, and they said, let's go out and kill someone. So they started knocking on doors of elderly people asking to use their phone, get a drink of water, that sort of thing.
Wow, that's just like spinning the wheel of death. Hey, we don't care who opens up. We're just going to go ahead.
No, exactly. And there were like a few elderly couples and other people that remember these girls doing this.
Wow.
But since there were more than one person in the house, they moved on.
Yeah. Well,
so they were spared by the fact that there was more than one person. But Anna Brackett, 85, was alone.
And they killed her.
They killed her. They got a butcher knife from the kitchen, and they stabbed her multiple times, and basically just they tried to steal her car, but the keys they found did not work in the car, so they just started very much like the case we're going to be talking about. They just started walking down the highway trying to hitchhike because they had no other way out.
And it was basically those love that they found together in this they found kinder spirits.
Yes,
and
they said they wanted to do something they'd never done.
Well, why didn't they go try underwater basket weaving instead or something? I don't know.
Or like a new mall.
Yeah, go to the new mall. Hell, try the Sky Mall. Why not? I think that's just a magazine. Never mind.
Go to that vampire site.
Yeah,
meet
exactly.
300-year-old werewolf.
That's right. You can meet someone that wants to. You'll kill fur-bearing upland animals with you.
Form a gang. It'll be great.
A vampire gang. But they're only out at night. You never see them during the day.
That would be perfect. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and they did go to prison for this. However, both have since been released.
So they're walking free.
Yes, I think one of them fared fairly well. She got married, had children. The other one, they don't know. She abused drugs, and they had trouble following up.
Well, now, that is truly, truly sad, that this is happening, and it seems to be happening more and more.
It does, and I am very concerned, and this is what I hope to talk about later too, with the internet, where you can go online and find a 300-year-old vampire or werewolf. You're able to find people that do think like you, whereas if you were, like when I was growing up, I was in a community. If I had gone up to any of my friend group or even outlying group and said, you know what, let's go kill a person for fun, I don't think I'd be able to find anyone to go along with that.
Yeah, but you came from a straight-laced household, right?
I'm from Wisconsin, which is approximately about 15 minutes away from where Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier tried to stab.
Really?
Did stab.
So you're fairly geographically speaking
15
close.
minutes away. Yeah.
15 minutes away?
Yep, barely. Yeah.
That could have
I
been
know exactly
you.
where this was. I grew up right around
that
there.
could have been you.
Yes, it could have.
Think about that. I mean, that's scary. That's really
Joel,
scary.
Joel, I didn't have friends.
You didn't have any friends?
We don't want to dwell on this in our final 8 minutes because we'll have a whole hour, and I really actually want to hear about the proximity of childhoods and what the difference may be just based on age and different eras and how society has evolved, not necessarily for the good, because that was a pretty key part of the film that was brought up was how these girls lived and how they interacted, and their poor parents are trying to make sense of it all. So I think we should hang on to that and just finish this thing up here because we got 7 more minutes of mad crime,
mayhem,
behavior, and mayhem, and vampire, werewolf, fur-bearing killing stuff. And
okay,
let's whip it on them, man.
I can give you one that predates, a lot of people's use of the internet. The internet existed, but it predated, so it was 1998. Okay, so this is somewhat before everyone was using the internet. So in November of 1998, a girl named Maddie Clifton disappeared.
Okay.
And they had a pretty good suspect, actually, in the neighborhood. They thought it was this guy named Larry Grisham, because he'd been arrested in the past for sexual battery in cases. But he did a lie detector test. Hey, lie detector.
Oh, yeah, it's so accurate,
Which, by the way, he failed. But but he was able to provide a rock solid alibi. So police they searched for this 8-year-old girl. A reward was offered. They didn't find her, but a little bit later, a 14-year-old was at home, and what was his first name? I don't know his first name here. Phillips is his last name. He was at home, and his mother went to clean his room.
Sure.
He had a water bed.
Yeah.
Okay. This water bed seemed to be leaking. So she's like, oh, my God, the water bed's leaking. We have to do something. Typical mother.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to ruin your floors and everything else,
Exactly. And so upon further examination, they realized it was not water. This was not water leaking. It was the body of Maddie, who he had hidden inside the pedestal of the waterbed.
Oh, that is just wrong. It reminds me of the Vegas couple.
Vegas.
Yeah, where they go to the hotel and they go to the guy and say, "Hey, our room stinks," right? Mm-hmm. And it's an old urban legend that's been around forever. And
under the bed.
Yeah,
so
under the bed. And
this was literally in the pedestal of the bed. So, and kudos to her. The mother ran outside the house and went to get police.
Wow.
So, her son was arrested that day at his school. And it was determined that the 8-year-old's cause of death was from stabbing and clubbing with a baseball bat.
What a horrible way to go. I mean,
I know.
That's just horrible. And the offenders, though, one thing I have noticed since we're talking is the offenders are getting younger and younger.
Well, I agree, and the violence seems to be getting more and more egregious.
What do you think that is? Is it video games? Is it movies? What is it? What's causing this culture of violence?
Well, okay, here's where I sort of get confused, and I want to talk to some experts about this. I'm not sure that the violence is actually getting worse, or if it's that we just have a better way of finding out about it.
And I don't mean just kids. I mean society as a whole.
Well, yeah, but when you look at society as a whole, violence as a whole, murder as a whole, has gone way, way down for years and years and years. So it's actually becoming rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
It's just that the news cycle is, I hear about news in Wyoming, in Iraq.
It's shock. It's all about shock substance. A lot of the news.
It is.
Headline
and in the Victorian era, everybody was violent.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, yeah. I mean, they were used to seeing people hung in the town square.
Hung in the square. They were used to seeing sewage in the streets. They were used to seeing animals being butchered in shops. So the violence actually, I think, was much worse way back when. But these outliers, because we've become so much more civilized, are frightening.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's really quite scary. And speaking of scary, next week, right here on After Hours AM, the Criminal Code, we will have Jeff Mudgett on the show. And he is the great-great-grandson of very own H.H. Holmes. And
that was the first profile I ever did on my site.
And he has evidence that he believes, he has evidence that will convince everybody that he is and was Jack the Ripper. Holmes, rather. H.H. was Jack the Ripper.
Well, I'm glad we're not talking to Jack the Ripper. That would be
that'd be cool, though, wouldn't it? I mean, think of the things you could find out. You profile him live.
If he was behind bars, yeah.
Maybe he's a 300-year-old werewolf.
Maybe that's him. I mean, Clarissa, come on, don't limit yourself. Date all sorts of guys. Just go out there and be like, if you're Jack the Ripper, I'm so coming with you. I just want to talk to you for a little bit. Sure, let's go to this dark alley, Clarissa. Let's talk.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm afraid. Oh, wait, before we end this story very quickly.
Sure.
There's a Supreme Court decision that actually affects everything here. There was a 5-4 Supreme Court vote that said that youth offenders nationwide, according to Human Rights Watch and other courts, they ruled that the death penalty for juveniles and life without parole for people under 18 whose crimes didn't involve killing was essentially unconstitutional. So that affects everybody who has ever been sentenced under 18 that got a life sentence without parole. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal because, what if you're 10 and you commit the crime? Although I don't know too many 10-year-old murderers are running around. But sure, I mean, what if you're 16 And you have, because we're a lot different people from even, from 16 to 26 even. There's a huge difference in the way we think and the way we feel. So, younger, maybe there is some rehabilitation that can happen, though. If you get them young enough.
I absolutely believe that. Our brains are different. And to sentence somebody who was 16 at the time of a crime, let's say, to life without parole, it does seem...
That's barbaric. Yeah, it's pretty tough. It's pretty hard. We got to get out of here. After the Fox News, we're going to dive headlong into the HBO special, Beware the Slender Man, with the creator. And, of course, we also have a couple of the doctors that came in and they lent their professional opinions to the show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Fox News Radio, I'm Kathleen Maloney. Confirmation continues to be a slow process for President Trump's cabinet. Fox's Jared Halpern has the latest live.
The Senate has been in non-stop session as Republican leaders work to confirm President Trump's cabinet as quickly as possible.
We are taking a maximum amount of time in a cabinet and presidential nominations that usually happen quickly.
Missouri Republican Roy Blunt complains that Democrats are delaying key votes. Democrats have kept the Senate in session overnight, trying to sink the confirmation of Attorney General nominee Jeff Sessions. Massachusetts Democrat Elizabeth Warren was ordered to sit last night. Republicans concluded she crossed the line, and Senate rules. Kathleen.
Thanks, Jared. The Northeast is bracing for what could amount to a major snowstorm. Fox's Gernal Scott has a live report.
Kathleen, parts of Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York could see snow accumulations from 6 to 10 inches or more into Thursday. Weather Service forecasters predict snow and high winds as well as temperatures below freezing. New York City Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia says conditions will be harsh, but...
Luckily, it's not likely to last very long, only a few hours, but during the period of time that it's coming down, it will be extraordinarily difficult to drive.
Snow is forecast to fall up to 4 inches an hour. Sleet and ice also expected to cause problems on Thursday, Kathleen.
Thanks, Gernal. Parts of Louisiana and Mississippi are cleaning up from tornado damage. The National Weather Service says the twister that struck eastern New Orleans was a powerful EF3. New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu estimates that 5,000 structures were damaged in varying degrees. You're listening to Fox News Radio, fair and balanced. No decision yet from an appeals court on whether President Trump's travel ban on immigrants from 7 nations remains blocked.
I think it's sad. I think it's a sad day. I think our security is at risk today, and it will be at risk until such time as we are entitled and get what we are entitled to as citizens of this country.
The president also saying he believes the court system is too political.
To say that someone is a so-called judge on top of denigrating a judge because of his national origins, this is beneath the dignity of the presidency.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Another federal lawsuit is aimed at blocking the president's executive order curbing government regulations. It requires federal agencies to repeal 2 existing regulations for every new one either proposed or issued. The lawsuit filed by consumer, environmental, and labor organizations claims the order exceeds the president's authority. Be careful where you sit.
Lazy Boy is recalling lift chairs because of a possible shock hazard. There are 2,500 recliners involved in the recall. The company says the lift chair's power supply cover can crack and end up detaching and exposing the electrical components, which could give users an electric shock. No injuries have been reported, but customers are urged to immediately stop using the power supplies and contact Lazy Boy for a free replacement power supply. The models involved are Gold Series, Clayton, luxury lift and power lift models. Ginny Cosola, Fox News.
A former president is offering the current president an idea for creating jobs, and lots of them. Jimmy Carter says if President Trump would embrace renewable energy sources like wind and solar power, it could result in millions of new jobs. Carter was the first U.S. president to install solar panels at the White House. I'm Kathleen Maloney, Fox News Radio.
You're listening to After Hours AM, the best in alternative talk radio. Got a question, comment, guest suggestion, or just want to say hi? Contact us at afterhoursam@gmail.com. That's afterhoursam@gmail.com. Want to call the show and be interactive? That's easy. The number is 612-326-6874. Again, the number is 612-326-6874. And thank you for listening. And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
Well, we got a heck of a show on tap, guys. Who do we got tonight, Eric?
I am telling you, my mind is blown. We delve into the shocking Wisconsin Slenderman stabbing case and the eloquent HBO documentary, Beware the Slender Man, detailing the crime and its psychocultural setting with the film's producer, Sophie Harris, developmental psychologist, Dr. Jacqueline D Woolley, and folklorist, Dr. Jack Zipes. On May 31st, 2014, Slender Man went from compelling but wholly fictional internet meme to household word when two 12-year-old Wisconsin girls, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier, lured a friend, Payton, I never got her last name right as far as pronunciation, but Leutner, into the woods and stabbed her 19 times, holy cats, in an effort to earn the favor of the faceless, elongated, dark-suited figure. As to the film, delving deep into this shocking crime, the sobering documentary Beware the Slender Man examines how an urban myth could take root in impressionable young minds, leading to an unspeakable act. Directed by Irene Taylor Brodsky, Beware the Slender Man covers all sides of this unusual ongoing case, drawing on an eerie array of Slender Man-inspired art, games, and self-produced video, all culled from the internet, along with heart-wrenching, unprecedented access to the two girls' families, courtroom testimony, and interrogation room footage. The film is Beware the Slender Man. It's on HBO, available on HBO right now. Dr. Jacqueline Woolley is professor of psychology and chairman of the psych department at the University of Texas. Her areas of primary interest are conceptual development in preschool and elementary school children, concept of mind, and fantasy-related distinction. All very appropriate for this case, I must say. Moving right along, Dr. Jack Zipes is an American retired professor of German at the University of Minnesota who has published and lectured on the subject of fairy tales, their evolution, and their social and political role in civilizing processes. Golly, what a shocking coincidence that these people are doing exactly the things that need to be covered in this film. And last but certainly not least, Sophie Harris is producer of Beware the Slender Man. She is an Emmy-nominated documentary film producer based in Portland, Oregon. With more than 10 years of experience, the films she has worked on have enjoyed widespread recognition, including an Academy Award nomination, the Sundance Grand Jury Prize for Best Documentary, multiple Emmy nominations for Best Documentary, Best Music and Sound, Best Economic Reporting, Best, She Rules, She Rules, She Rules. Welcome to the program, my friends.
I'm so glad you read my CV verbatim.
Well, he is the best in the business of doing that.
Far be it from me to vary or veer from the path.
Well, now, that was quite a mouthful, Eric, and thank you for that wonderful introduction for all of our guests tonight. But we're going to talk a little bit now about the case itself, the Slender Man case. But we can't do that without talking about Slender Man first. Now, how did Slender Man come into public consciousness? I mean, really, what is he? How did it work? And how did give me the whole ball of wax, guys. About the
Who
Slender
wants
Man.
to address the concept and cultural significance of Slender Man himself?
Well, I can start with the bare bones sort of origin story.
Please, whip it on
I
us.
think Dr. Zeitz and Dr. Woolley can add some insight to it. But yeah, so Slender Man began, what's interesting is you can really pinpoint where the idea was first planted, which was in 2009. A man under the username of Vicar Surge created a photoshopped image in a competition of just sort of creepy photoshopped images. And so there are these two, I think, haunting images of, they sort of look archival, and you can see Slender Man off in the distance at a playground around children. And then what's really interesting about Slender Man's story is that it just caught on. And, in a crowdsourced way, somebody else wrote another story, somebody else did another image, somebody else made a video game, somebody else did this, and it sort of built on itself, following sort of certain canons of, he's tall, skinny, wears a suit, has a white face, doesn't have any features, a slender sickness where if you're around him, you feel sick, you throw up, you start to go a little bit crazy, you might do violent acts. But, even though there are these canons of who he is and sort of what rules he follows, it's also very malleable. And so, in some stories he is benevolent, in some he is sort of unknown, and you're not sure if he's there to hurt you or to warn you. And then in others, he's, inspiring violence and a bad guy. So it's sort of an interesting mix of a myth with parameters, but also open to a lot of creativity. And I think that, in that way, he taps into some of our deepest fears that have existed in other myths over time and feel very familiar and very true of this.
I was gonna ask about that. Like the thought that Slender Man, you Sophie, you said he was created in 2009, right? Mm-hmm. So, do you feel like there is a connection to myths that are older than that?
Certainly. Well,
that's where Dr. Jack comes in.
Yeah. He brought our attention and made a really wonderful point about drawing parallels to the Pied Piper. And Dr. Zeitz, maybe you can talk about that.
Yes. Well, we could even trace it even further back and talk about the many sort of folk tales that people told about changelings. The fairies quite often supposedly kidnapped children and exchanged the child that they kidnapped with some sort of very ugly-looking baby or dwarf or something like that. So the theme of abduction by a mysterious creature, unknown, really goes, back a few thousand years or so. But the Pied Piper, which is what people call a legend, strictly speaking from a folklorist point of view, originated in the 13th century when, in fact, from the town of Hamel, something like 30 or 40, or the entire village, all the children from a particular village disappeared, and some attributed the disappearance to a rat catcher, the Pied Piper, a mysterious figure who comes to the town and gets the town rid of rats. and is not paid by the mayor, and therefore, out of revenge, sort of lures the children from the village, or there are other interpretations. There was a children's crusade at that time. The children may have gone off by themselves, and there's another interpretation where the children may have left by themselves, migrated themselves without telling their parents because of poverty and hunger. And once the small oral tale was spread, there are many, many variants, many different versions of that, up through Robert Browning, the great British poet in the middle of the 19th century, wrote sort of the exemplary poem about this legend. So that's sort of the background from a folklorist perspective.
You know what was not covered in the movie that I kind of wanted to ask you, Dr. Zipes? And I'm sorry, this is selfish of me. I apologize. This is a burning question. What is, in your mind, what is the purpose of these stories? You know, because they do take on a life much bigger than themselves, and it is the all rolled into one, and Slender Man is kind of rolled into that. What do you think the purpose of those folklore tales was?
Well, I don't think that there was a particular purpose. I mean, again, there are many different variants, many different versions. But I think the tale, the legend, which was widespread in Central Europe from about the 13th century onwards, reflects the disappearance of a lot of young people who because of poverty or for all sorts of reasons, were disappeared from their homes, from their villages. And I think people always want some sort of, as you asked, what was their purpose? They want some sort of understanding. Why did certain young people die, disappear, or ran away? And of course, there were many, many different reasons. Peasants, particularly in the medieval period and up through the 19th century, their lives were extremely hard. There was no contraception to speak of, and so the families were extremely large. Many of the children died, but a lot fled from there. It just simply disappeared because they couldn't be supported by their families.
So it was an explanation more than any sort of morality tale,
right?
Like that you
or is it also rolled into there a cautionary tale?
Yes.
You know,
yes,
be
definitely.
good or they'll get you. Do not wander away or the fairy folk will make you one of theirs.
And always pay the rat catcher.
That's right. Always pay the exterminator. You don't want to have the Orkin Man mad at you because he does actually carry an instrument with him. So you know,
this might go toward.
In the legend, it's quite clear that there is a cause, you know, for their disappearance because the mayor was too greedy and didn't want to pay the rat catcher, didn't want to pay the Pied Piper, and that sort of provides the excuse for the Pied Piper to take the children from that village. Of course, there was also the whole question of slavery, exploitation, children being stolen and then forced to work.
And that's where the term "pay the piper" comes from.
Oh, very nice, nice connection. This though, I mean, this is another thing that I was kind of that I didn't understand quite, and that I think Dr. Woolley, you might be able to chime in on is why do you think that the Slender Man story, which may not necessarily have been, if it was in that sort of vein, meant for juveniles. Well, why do you think the Slender Man appeals so much? Because clearly he does.
Yeah, I think in the case of these girls, he provided a sense of belonging, which both of them, I think, sought. What a couple things are really unique about the Slender Man. I mean, a lot of the myths that children are presented with are fully formed. Santa Claus is pretty much all set. We know everything that he does,
backstory,
where
everything.
he lives, and but as Sophie pointed out, there's some room for control with regard to the Slender Man, and that sort of crosses an important boundary. I mean, when children have control over what they're creating, it's very different than receiving something kind of fully formed.
Yeah.
And I think that also interacts with the internet as kind of a brand new territory that we don't understand much about. I mean, the children, these two girls saw photographs of Slender Man. They read reports about Slender Man, presumably written by adults, authority figures. So there's that as well. There's that whole new sort of sense of how do you decide what to believe when you're in kind of uncharted territory.
Yeah, because
Slender evidence that you're given.
Yeah, Slender Man hit the scene in 2009 on Creepypasta. It was a Creepypasta internet meme on, of course, it was by Eric Knudsen. And he created it. In fact, I know Eric. And he had said, hey, man, this is just so I could win a contest. I never meant it to be anything more. But, he's laughing out of the bank now with all the merchandise that's created between video games and this and that, which he owns all the rights to now because he owns the rights to Slender Man. But it's like when we were talking, when he and I were talking, he created it for a website called Something Awful. He just wanted to win. He never intended it to become a source of murder, and that's what's it's almost become synonymous now with, instead of being a creepy fun thing, scare your friends and be scared of this, it's forever going to be locked with this particular crime. And that,
I don't think anybody could have anticipated it. It's sort of a perfect storm, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. But okay, now you have the Slender Man existing. We know where he came from. He's given him a backstory. He's given him, people have, not the creator, but other people along the way have given him credence to existing, so to speak. And how much peer pressure is involved in this? I mean, are these their peers that are feeding this fire?
Could I throw something out?
Sure.
As a possibility, there has been a change in the way we raise children, and there's a lot more parental fears about children being abducted or exploited sexually or attacked, and so and this was not true during my lifetime. I'll be 80 years old this year, and when I grew up, my parents used to just throw us out on the weekends.
Yeah, mine too.
To get lost.
Yeah, get out of here. Go be something.
Right, go have a good time.
Yeah.
And there was never a fear that we would be abducted or maltreated or let us say enslaved.
Sure.
But times have changed in the last 30 or 40 years, or maybe 50 years, and children grow up with this fear of being that there's some sort of predator or a pedophile around the corner, and that they always have to watch out. And could it be that, to a certain extent, Slender Man, in various guises, represents a type of a fear that children or young people, because I think it's probably more young people who have invented stories, films, and so on, games about Slender Man. Maybe it's a way of their dealing with this fear, and maybe Jackie, maybe you can talk to that.
Well, I was going to ask you quick, Dr. Zipes.
Yes.
Do you think that this has bred a society of victims, that kind of thinking? Worried about the guy in the panel van with the puppy and candy? Do you think it's kind of made us all somewhat victims of fear, and it makes us a victimized society?
I think there's a danger there. I think that children grow up, as I said, much differently than I grew up.
I don't disagree with you, Dr. Zipes, but coming from so I was telling you guys earlier, I was raised 15 minutes from Waukesha. And I go back there every year, several times a year. And I do joke with people often that Wisconsin is kind of like being thrown back in time. But my parents did not lock their doors until 3 years ago. Ever. And I was one of those kids that, like, I would leave in the morning and come back at dinner time. It really was kind of like the 1950s. And I'm kind of wondering I'm wondering if maybe they weren't as aware. Like, Sophie, I don't know, because you had access to, more of the whole entire process as a whole. Did you think that their families and the environment was as aware as other people are, or that it was any different?
As aware meaning?
As aware as maybe like in California, everybody's paranoid about everything. I live here now. They're terrified of everything. They really are. Anything, everything. And I noticed that in Wisconsin, it doesn't necessarily seem to be that way. So, like, with their kids being online as much as they were, do you think they thought that might be a danger?
I think one of the most interesting parts of making this film was learning just sort of honestly how moderate the families are, both of them. I wouldn't say they were strong in either direction. They weren't incredibly paranoid and watching their children's every move, but they also were diligent. And so, I would say that it would be average, not extraordinary in either direction, certainly not something to point a finger at in terms of how did this happen, in my opinion.
Not at all, but they weren't like overly permissive, you don't think?
Yeah, I don't think they were overly in either direction, but in terms of the fear, something that I think is interesting is that, forgive me, I did so much research on this film, and, as in a feature-length film, you can only get so much of it in. So some of this, didn't make it into the final film. But
sure.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that we discussed was just sort of how scary stories and horror and is sort of a developmental process. I know personally when I was, in middle school, I loved scary stories. I loved this stuff. I loved getting too scared with friends and, doing, what is it, Bloody Mary in the
Bloody
mirror.
Mary, I was talking about that today.
Yeah.
Good old Bloody Mary. Yeah.
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary.
I did that. I did that.
But you don't get to talk to people online about it, and you don't have adults that verify it.
Yeah. I tried Bloody Mary. No
different,
drink
but
arrived.
I think the point I was trying to make is that there is something that's sort of what's fun and what's appealing about scary stories, and even as an adult, is like it lets you kind of push your limit of something that you're afraid of in a safe space.
Yes.
And so yes, you are scared of what's out there, but if you dabble in it just a little bit, it's sort of like exposure therapy or something. It's like if you deal with it just a little and you confront it and you look at the scary things and then you get to turn the light on and everything's okay, it sort of helps you process those scary things that are out there that you don't know about and can't know about.
Right. It's very similar to what little kids do when they pretend. Pretending and imagining gives you an opportunity to experience something larger than what you normally experience, and that might include something scary, but it gives you a safe space in which to work that out.
True. I know a friend of mine makes horror movies, and I shouldn't say a friend. I got a good interview, George Romero. It's like he told me, it's danger from afar. Yeah, I mean,
and then I think the interesting thing, and Jackie, you can probably speak to this too, is that, then kids, where is the boundary? How do you know what afar means, and sort of confusion over what's the differentiation between pretend and real?
Right. And Mm-hmm. And what happens? I mean,
before you go into that, oh, go ahead, Dr. Woolley. I wanted to explain for the audience kind of what the phenomenon of schizotypy is.
Well, why don't we save that for after the break? We got to run a break, and so it's a perfect time to run a break. We'll be right back. We can pay some bills. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk more about this case, this horrible case that happened in Wisconsin involving the Slender Man. Don't go anywhere. Hey everybody, this is Joel Sturgis, and did you know that After Hours AM and America's Most Haunted have a great new website out there? You're going to want to visit America's-most-haunted.com. There you can get all the new content from all the writers for America's Most Haunted, as well as the great haunted headlines everybody loves each and every week, as well as catch After Hours AM live right there, along with podcasts, past shows, and get to know your hosts, as well as contact us all in one stop. You're going to love it. You're not going to want to go anywhere else. So come to America's-most-haunted.com today.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
I got a rather serious problem over here.
All right, what are we looking at?
Cranky mother-in-law asleep on the couch in the man cave.
Dear God.
It gets worse.
That's impossible.
She's passed out on the remote.
I stand corrected.
What do I do?
Okay, I want you to grab a Torrin Big Red hydraulic bottle jack.
Okay.
Now you wedge that bad boy in under your mother-in-law and crank her up skyward.
It's working. And got the remote.
Great. Now grab that Torrin Big Red 2-ton folding shop crane and put that woman on wheels.
And away we go.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852, or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
Hello, welcome to the Burger Barn.
No, yeah, I still understand you. Let's try it again.
Okay. Hello, welcome to the Burger Barn.
Much better.
This man is learning how to become a professional intercom announcer. Yes, there are hundreds of immediate openings for annoying and inarticulate people just like you. And after just 6 short weeks at the School of Intercom Announcing, you too will be ready to frustrate thousands. We'll teach you how to blow into a microphone, how to obscure key words in important announcements.
This is the final boarding call for singing, bottle score, mortifying, and Google City.
With your PA degree from SIA, you'll be on your way to low-paying jobs in discount stores, malls, airports, even restaurants. The School of Intercom Announcing. Just dial 1-800-245-6363 today.
Do you have a question for our guest tonight? Don't feel like calling the show? Not a problem. Email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Again, that's afterhoursam@gmail.com.
speed up, let the rumors spread. Don't you try to catch my blind.
And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And we are going to dig headlong into this case that, wow, you know, the more and more I read about it, the more and more I'm digging about it, is really shocking, Clarissa. And we had touched upon it previously in just private discussions. And, of course, now that the documentary from HBO, Fear the Slender Man, blows the lid, or Beware, rather, of the Slender Man, blows the lid completely off this case. I was shocked that they released the juvenile's name because I thought it was protocol not to do that.
I agree. I was really surprised by that as well.
So that shocked me right away. And how forthcoming the families were to give info. That was another thing, you know, that they gave so much.
Yeah, Sophie can speak about releasing the name. I mean, that varies from state to state, but...
Sure.
Yeah, in Wisconsin and in a few other states, the law is that if you are accused of committing first-degree homicide or attempted first-degree homicide, you are automatically placed in adult court.
Okay.
So these girls were not considered juveniles. They were considered adults, and therefore their names were released and their pictures were released. Now, after they were initially booked, their lawyers have the opportunity to argue their case back into juvenile court. So,
but the damage has been done at that point.
Yeah, genie's out of the bottle.
Publicity. My gosh. That's interesting.
So, the cases in Wisconsin that are really hard are when fetuses kill.
Yeah, exactly. The Texas or the Wisconsin fetal murders. That's right, where they just jump out and start stabbing people.
If it was your child, though, you know, and it was, you know, done as a juvenile, and you thought that there were extenuating circumstances, which and you guys, if you have not seen Beware the Slender Man, watch it. Seriously. Well, all your questions will be answered. But, you know, in this case where there were extenuating circumstances, or it seems certainly like there were, do you feel like that's a good law?
You know, personally, I given how much I learned in the process of making this film about juvenile brain development, you know, I think that there is a lot to be said for examining those factors before you automatically place a child in adult court. So, you know, I don't deny that they did something really horrible, but I do think that if we, you know, want our justice system to be rehabilitative, you know, putting 12-year-old girls' mugshots on the front of every website and every newspaper before they've been convicted of anything, before they've gone to trial, is maybe not the right order of events.
Well, you know, we are talking about egg game country over there, so, you know, just saying.
We have not caught up yet. I think.
Well,
I'd love to hear a little bit.
That would be. I can't even imagine.
We were talking about this during the break, actually. We had to keep shutting ourselves up because we got so involved in the conversation. I'd love to hear a little bit about just some of the facts and theories as far as development, so child development. At what age should we be thinking about people being fully formed or relatively fully formed? And then the reverse of it is, we were hearing that developmentally that some of these things as far as reality versus unreality, that most 3-year-olds are able to tell the difference. So we're really talking about two very widely disparate ends of a spectrum there. I'd love to hear some thoughts and just some facts and figures on that from our professionals.
Right. Well, so when this first happened, I got a lot of calls from the media, and everyone was wondering, well, why did they do it? Is the problem here that they couldn't differentiate fantasy from reality? So they were 12. I mean, research from my lab shows that children can differentiate fantasy from reality by the age of 2 or 3. So then you've got to ask, well, how is it that these girls seem to be so confused about what was real and what was not real? And I think a better, one way to look at it is you take everything in the world and you put it into either one box or the other box. You put it into the real box, where we put maybe, our uncle and our aunt and our grandmother, and we put it into the not real box where we put, unicorns and monsters, right? But the other way to look at it is that there's a continuum. And it goes from not real all the way to real, and then there's everything in between, and that we all draw the line, we all draw the boundary between real and not real in different places. And even the same person might draw the boundary between real and not real in different places at different times based on the world around them, or based on who they're with, or based on their social situation, or based on the emotions involved in the situation, or based on whether they have schizophrenia or not. I mean, there are lots of factors that can affect where you draw that line between what's real and what's not real. And so your first point, that the brain is still developing until, the frontal lobe is still developing until about age 25. So that's sort of a whole other issue. When are people old enough to be able to vote, or when are they old enough to be able to drink, or when are they old enough to be able to drive?
Mm-hmm.
We really don't seem to know where to draw the line. But the reality fantasy distinction is still, it can be fuzzy even in adults. You go see the movie Psycho, and you come home and you're afraid to take a shower. Well, is that because you really believe that someone's about to attack you? Of course not. But your behavior is still being influenced by the emotions generated by that fantasy.
Well, I mean, they have a laundry list of diagnoses for these girls. If you read the official synopsis from the investigation, the paperwork, they have they got childhood onset schizophrenia. They have
schizophrenia, oppositional defiant disorder.
Exactly, just a laundry list.
I can kind of elucidate some of those for you, but as a clinical psychologist, I got to say I was confused because schizotypy is not a diagnosis necessarily in the DSM. So,
yeah, see, I don't know. I'm not.
I had some questions.
I read it as a radio host. It makes, as a layman, you look at it and go, "Wow, these people are nuts." But there's a reason for it, though. I mean, obviously, there's. Slender Man was the trigger. It wasn't. It was the trigger for them to do what they did. Am I far off the base?
I think, again, this is a perfect storm situation. So either one of them alone probably wouldn't have done this. Mm-hmm. They were in there together. They were isolated. They didn't have a lot of other peers who would have acted as reality checks. There was the Slender Man. There just a lot of things all came together.
And they weren't violent. I mean, we should point that out, that neither of the girls in this were violent in isolation on their own. They don't have, as far as I'm aware, they don't have juvenile records or violence before that.
But they come together and then they just decide to kill?
Right. I agree that this was kind of a perfect storm because in general, when there are juvenile crimes that involve violence, usually they also have violence in isolation. And these girls did not. I mean, it really is an outlier in that way.
Could I ask a question about their family backgrounds? Has anything come out about their relations with their parents? Is it possible that there was something that they were doing to confront their parents or to somehow embarrass their parents, or perhaps they were maltreated themselves and were drawing attention? Has anything come out about the background of their families?
Sophie?
No. I've spent a lot of time with both families, and and as I said earlier, I think they're both. I think both families raise their children in a very respectable way, in a very middle of the road way, in a very loving way. Morgan's father does have schizophrenia, and so that would be one thing you can point to as,
pre-existing. That broke my heart, though. I almost cried during that interview, just so you know. That was hard to watch.
Yeah,
with him.
That's really sad, but all that put together still doesn't change the fact that he stabbed a poor victim 19 times. Mm-hmm. We can say poor them, they had a bad home life or whatever, but still, there's a victim here that was stabbed 19 flipping times.
Well, the statement is that it had to be done.
Yeah.
That's what we keep hearing throughout the film. It was necessary to protect.
There were some particularly cold-blooded. There were some particularly cold-blooded sounding things as well, though. That was,
So there must be some anger there.
Interrogation
a
tapes.
great deal of anger.
No, no, there is. I mean, I've been dealing with criminals a long, long time in my career, and when somebody tells the victim who's been stabbed 19 times, just lay down, you'll bleed out slower.
Yeah,
that's cold. I'm sorry.
That's very cold.
That
is very cold.
That was rough. It was rough. I like I said, I deal with criminals, thousands of them.
Well, I think
that was a particularly interesting statement.
I think that, there was definitely some mental health, in my opinion, and I'm not obviously a clinician, but, if you listen to what the girl said, there's conflicting, very confused emotions. Morgan did stab her, and then she said she was sorry. She tried to clean her up. She didn't quite understand that she was hurt. I'm not a clinician, but
Morgan had the blunted affect. Yeah, Morgan had the blunted affect that I'm used to seeing with schizophrenic patients, and I do want to point that out to the audience really quickly. Is that I know that when a lot of people watch this film, they're going to see Morgan especially and kind of hone in on Morgan and the fact that she didn't cry and she didn't seem upset. But what I'd like people to understand is that when someone has schizophrenia, we call it blunted affect. So affect is another word for emotion. So emotions don't come across the same way as they do in somebody that is healthy or that is schizophrenic and on medication. So a lot of people with schizophrenia have what is called this blunted affect. I've seen it hundreds of times, and it doesn't mean that they're not feeling empathy. It doesn't mean that they don't feel. It could be part of the mental illness. I don't know if that you got any of that, Sophie, while you were looking at this tape.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
It's striking.
Did you guys ever interview the victim?
We did not. We reached out to their family many times over the course of making the film, and invited them to participate many times, but they did not want to, and I completely respect that decision.
Sure.
And so,
no. Would you say that this is obviously? I watched a portion of the interview, or the documentary. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing. It looks like it's very, very well done. It also looks like it was done pretty right down the middle. It didn't seem like it took a side on anything. It was just you hear the facts, and you had some great stuff in there. I would imagine, though, the victim's family, maybe they're looking to put this behind her, and that could be why. I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe that's why they weren't so eager to get involved.
I can't speak to what their reason was. Yeah. I know they participated in a 2020 special at some point. Yeah. And then have been pretty silent since then. So, I would completely understand if they just don't want to talk about it. That would make a lot of sense.
Well, now it's still an ongoing case. Am I correct? There has not been a total resolution to this case as we talk today. Has there been?
Oh, yeah. No, there has not. They have not even begun trial.
Are they going to be tried separately?
So aren't you worried at all, or weren't they worried at all? Their attorneys that potential jurors are going to see this, and aren't they worried it would sway their feelings? I mean, I'm not putting the blame on you guys at all. I'm talking about their attorneys. I mean, weren't their attorneys at least a little worried that someone that may potentially be in the jury box might see this and go, let's hang them high, so to speak?
Well, if you look at what media is out there and how much coverage these girls had gotten before we even were involved, I would say that was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. Well, no, because it sure seems like they said a lot in the documentary. We watch a lot of documentaries about crime, and in fact, we just had the folks from Killing Fields on last week, and a lot of it is, I was surprised. I was shocked. There was so much there that could taint a juror. That, in my opinion, as just a lay guy out here, lay person, just a radio host, it would sway my opinion.
Hey, Joel, didn't it seem weird to you that they were able to talk to these girls without an attorney or a parent
That
present?
made me, that also surprised the heck out of me.
I would have freaked out.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Kid.
I mean, heck, yeah, I'm not.
And those interrogation tapes were released to any member of the media.
Because I remember
on the air.
Yeah, I remember I got a mailer or one of those random releases that I could have gotten them too for my show.
Oh, wait, how can that? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm in California now. I grew up in Wisconsin. How is that legal? They're minors.
They're being tried as adults.
They were not in juvenile court.
Exactly. Just
being tried as adults.
Yep, they are being tried as adults.
How could they even be questioned? How could they even be... Okay, because when they're questioned, how do they even know what they're charged with yet when they're questioned? How could they even be interrogated without a parent present?
Good question. I'm not the attorney. I mean,
it's weird as hell to me. Hey, before we run out of time, because this is galloping by, we only have about 10 more minutes. It's kind of amazing, actually. One of the things that struck me, and I'd just love to hear any and all of our panelists' input. What about the concept, the idea of socialization? It seems to me that's a key factor here, is how poorly socialized both of these girls were, and the fact that they turned then to the internet. It is mentioned in the film that the internet becomes a peer of a sort, and to me that just seems dangerous as hell.
Again, some of this could stem from the diagnosis. I mean, the girls had problems. I think they each had some problems making friends. They weren't the most outgoing and socially adept, and they found solace in each other. And that the internet can provide that for kids who are lonely. And again, I do think chances are that a lot of their social isolation stemmed from their psychological issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think also one really interesting fact is just to really look at their age, and this sort of just pre-menses moment in a girl specifically is an incredibly impressionable age. There's a lot of research about preteens and especially girls. Evolutionarily, you are going from a child to a parent in the matter of a couple of years. And your whole, understanding of the world is changing, and it's changing very fast. And you have to biologically learn a lot of new information very, very quickly. And so we're sort of hardwired at that age to be learning from our peers, because you don't have enough time to experientially learn everything. If you are living and somebody tells you, we don't go over that mountain because there are tigers on the other side of that mountain. You're not going to go check yourself. You're going to take the word of your peer who told you don't go over there.
Sure.
And so you are just sort of hungry for information about how the world works at that age.
Mm-hmm.
The old adage that if all your friends, jumped off a cliff, would you do it too? It's like, hell yes. If everyone is jumping off of a cliff, they know something you don't. And if you don't jump, you're going to be ostracized because you were the only one that didn't do it. So,
and you're not a real lemming.
Exactly, you're not a real lemming. Don't worry about it. You're not real. Don't worry. No. Oh, go ahead.
The other thing that's going on at that age is identity formation, and at that age you're trying to figure out what's special about me. What do I have that other kids don't have? What bonds me to other kids? And in this case, the Slender Man, I think, gave them something that made them unique and made them feel special and contributed to their sense of identity.
Isn't like the idea of I heard this back in school, but the idea of chumship, a friendship, being at that age being more important even than boys would be to young girls. I mean, that was like everything at that age, isn't it? Between friends.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I agree. I remember being that age, and just it's all you can see. It's so important.
Yeah, they're the only person that really matters. Their opinion. I mean, above, even though you like boys, above everything else, there's that one person, and it's that had to have played a part.
Well, either way, I mean, it's a crime. And I really, truly hope these young ladies get the help that they need, the offenders, and of course the one that was the victim, because I would imagine she had some long-lasting physical problems as we move. She moves forward.
Or emotional. I mean, I can't imagine what she's been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm
be so betrayed.
Just to get back to the filmmaking. Well, exactly, be betrayed.
Yeah.
Get back to the filmmaking portion of it. Now, in radio forever, we've called it predatory reporting, meaning that you jump on the hot story and you report it no matter what. I saw a lot of that going on with this case. And that really, instead of having these girls be humanized, they were they were demonized. Now we also see that they really suffer from mental illness. Do you think that Clarissa and the doctors in the panel, do you believe that even creates a bigger divide in this country of fearing mental illness?
I really hope not. I hope that people understand that, with schizophrenia, I think the numbers are something like 1% of all people with schizophrenia are violent. And I think people need to understand that mental illness is not something to be feared. It's something to take seriously and get treatment for, but it's nothing to be feared. This is one of those situations that really is an outlier, which is why everyone's hearing about it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
What would your opinion, Clarissa, the treatment going forward for these ladies will be? Your best guess?
Well, gosh, I mean, childhood schizophrenia or childhood onset schizophrenia can tend to run, more severely depending. The earlier the onset, sometimes the more severe it is. So I hope that I saw this at the end of the documentary that she had voluntarily agreed to start medication. It looked like I was very heartened by that. I know that her entire world is going to change and it's going to be upset. But I think the earlier she gets treatment, the earlier she starts medication, the better off she'll be. The earlier you start treatment for these types of problems, the better off you'll be. So, I'm very heartened by their chances of full rehabilitation.
I'd love to speak to the predatory reporting part of this.
Sure.
And I think that
bullying issues too.
At least I hope in the film, that when we approached this case, we were already very interested in sort of adolescent brain development and how the internet is affecting that. So that was sort of our interest in the case coming in. And this was, sort of a headline story that was getting not very in-depth coverage. And I do think that there's something to be said for talking about these things, and taking it beyond the headline, So often we just see what's in bold and we don't, look at the backstory. We don't go and, spend time with the families. We don't go and learn about the illness. We don't go and learn about the historical context, and so our hope with this film was to sort of, not give some context, give some feeling, give some personalities, give some names and some faces and some emotions to this story that was, sort of salacious horror, scandal, etc.
When Bill, Anissa's father, I made some notes while I was watching it when he said, "My focus is Anissa, not Slender Man." And I was glad about that. I was glad that the parents were able to talk about their children because they are children. And I think people are forgetting that they are still kids. Even though, yes, there was a victim and yes, it was a violent crime, they are still children.
And one thing I think your movie hopefully will do is to bring heightened awareness to how little we really do know about the adolescent brain and how much more research we need on mental health and what to do about these kinds of problems.
I think it was said best on the show one time. I think Eric, I can't remember who it was, or it was off air. We had a psychologist on with us, and he says, here's the deal. We know more about the male erection than we do about the adolescent brain.
Well, there you go. Yep.
You tell me which one matters more in society.
No, it's so true. And in California, they just had legislation. I'm talking like the last 2 years, they had legislation out here, full, big sweeping legislation that says that if someone was convicted before age 18, actually before age 23, that if they were convicted and got a life sentence, that now we are, we have to, it's mandated that we go back and review that sentence and review their rehabilitation because their brains were so different. But that legislation just happened.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hate to cut it short, but we got to get out of here. We got about 20 seconds left. So why don't you tell them where they can see the film and
this is a very
all that kind of good
thing.
stuff?
The film is on HBO. It's on HBO Now. It's on HBO Go. It's playing live. So, I encourage people to watch it. And I really appreciate getting this kind of media coverage and you guys reaching out and being so interested in the film.
Very interesting stuff. I'd like to thank the panel for coming on, discussing this with us. Great documentary, by the way. Everyone check it out. You won't be disappointed. Very interesting. If anything, it sheds more light on mental illness as well. So if you're not a big Slender Man person, you get a better sense of how the adolescent in turmoil brain works. You get to see firsthand.
And you can hear more from Dr. Woolley and Dr. Zeitz, who are wonderful and so well-spoken in our film.
But
thank you, Sophie. This was really fun.
Yeah, for everyone that's listening, thank you so much for listening. This is Joel, Eric, and Clarissa signing off. Take care, love each other, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.